Previously, I tested 4 NVMe adapters to find out which one's the best. Now, I've published a guide for 3 of them. This is number 4. And we're going to launch right into the unboxing. Hopefully, you're ready to join us on this journey. Now, what is this adapter? What can we do with it? Why would you even want to consider watching? Well, this is the Jeyi QUAD U.2 to M.2 NVMe adapter. Quite the mouthful, but that is a Gen 4 PCIe Express conversion for our M.2 drives to U.2 interface. Now, U.2 might look somewhat familiar. Have a look at this. This looks kind of familiar. It must be a SATA port, but it's not a SATA port. The U.2 interface has extra pins, so let me check. Okay, here's a SATA adapter. Here's a nice Samsung SSD, a 840 Pro. You actually notice where the notch is on our SSD, we actually have pins on the U.2 enterprise drive. Okay, so there's another problem. Enterprise-grade SSDs are really expensive, so that basically means this adapter is somewhat redundant. So how can we use this adapter? Well, it's a good paperweight. No, I'm just joking. Stay tuned. There's a very easy fix for that. We're going to take M.2 NVMe's, we're going to install a RAID 0 pull, and we're even going to do some testing to see if it's any good. And check out these traces. Always nice to confirm we've got full x16 lane usage on this particular adapter, which means we're going to get incredible speeds, or at least I am hopeful. And this is definitely meant to be a Gen 4, although it doesn't actually say anything there, but fingers crossed, we'll get some tremendous speeds. And oh, there's nice little hardware little drive indicators there. Now we'll zoom out a little bit. Let's get ourselves settled. If you want to check out some of the related videos, check out a previous video where I went through all 4 and did a nice comparison. But to get you up to speed, we're taking 4 NVMes, the ADATA Legend 800s, throwing them into this adapter, and to achieve it, we need a U.2 to M.2 adapter. Now these adapters look incredibly similar to SSDs. You'll be completely forgiven if you thought this was an SSD, but not quite the same. We can open this up, and I'll show you in a second. We can put NVMes inside. So there's the adapter. Pretty cool. Very nice. And do remind me to keep track of this hardware. We're going to need this later. Otherwise, we can't mount our NVMes. Really, really important. But here it is. Very easy to open up. On the inside, we have a tiny little PCB, full aluminium construction, minus the PCB, obviously. And there it is. We can fit M.2 M key and M.2 B key. Now the M key is the one we're after. That's NVMe PCIe Express, but the other one's actually for a SATA SSD, so not quite sure if that's going to work. We'll test it. But there's those pins again. Very clear difference between the U.2 and SSD or SATA interface. Now for the fun part. Reassembly. I just quickly want to show you what these look like within the actual adapter. Take note, there's 4 little screws. Highly recommend you fit those, otherwise these turn into a little bit of custard, falling all over the place. But there it is. It slots in pretty easily, and that's now converted our NVMe to, I guess, PCIe or U.2 PCIe. Kind of cool. Now these little aluminium adapters are relatively inexpensive. I think I got mine for around $8 US, but they can go for as much as maybe 20. So we're going to take 4 of these ADATA Legends. And take no price hikes at the moment. Definitely don't buy NVMes at the moment. They're pretty expensive. But there it is. If you want to check out the related videos, check those. But for now, we're launching into this adapter. And let's see if we can get some NVMes installed, get this thing secured, and do some speed tests to see, well, how fast is this thing? And is it even worth your time? Well, let's quickly find out. So starting with the obvious, taking these apart. I'm going to fly through relatively quickly. And I do have a few curious questions, like can we run a SSD and an NVMe at the same time? That's one of the things I'm going to test as well. Fingers crossed. But there it is, nice and organized. We've got 4 ADATA Legends. These are pretty good value NVMes, I will admit. They've served me really well so far. I think it's coming up on maybe 1 year, so that's not too bad. And using a little Aromax electric screwdriver today as well. Check the description for product links if you're keen for that. Whoa! Sometimes I don't know my own strength. It's okay, we didn't need those. They weren't that important, surely. I'm not even going to use all of them. You'll see what I'm going to do. But let's grab one of these nice Phillips bits. Quickly get that supercharged at my normal speed, and let's grab some hardware. Now, is this going to mount up? I get this vague idea that this may not thread. That does look like the wrong size, the wrong bit. Okay, so we'll switch that out, grab a good bit. And one curious part on the mounting, we do need a standoff. Now, very keen to see if we can actually mount this without a standoff, but no. Okay, so we definitely need a standoff. Remember that packet I showed you earlier? Well, there it is. We have lots of little hardware in here. We need to take these out carefully. I'll be very gentle this time so don't lose any bits. But there they are. The little gold standoffs are what we need. And a few different lengths of screw to try and keep this all together. Now, I think we might go for the longer one, which will help us to secure this. And fingers crossed, that NVMe is not going to go anywhere. Oh, nice electric power here. Very, very cool. So far, so good. It's not damaged anything, and that electric screwdriver is really doing its job. Now, one little problem on this particular adapter is going to be heat. And another little problem is you got a 50-50 chance of reinstalling this correctly. In this case, wrong way around, just for illustration, of course. It's meant to go this way, just look for the cutouts. Okay, now for mounting, we want to fit at least 4 screws to the side to secure this adapter. I'm going to show you what not to do by only mounting one because, well, I'm kind of lazy. I'm going to have to open this up and switch these out. I'm not going to leave the NVMEs in here forever. This is just so you can watch and see what you think of this particular adapter. Now, once we've got these slotted in, I'm going to say we're ready. I think that's good to go. So we'll mount a couple of screws at the back as well. I'd say bare minimum, probably 2 of these little screws. You might get away with 1, or at least I'm going to try 1. Yes, that's one of the problems. Definitely put at least 2 in those brackets as well. Very important. Now that we're all finished, what do we do next? Well, there is one interesting little thing that I want to test while we're here. And full disclosure, I did the test and the results were kind of expected, perhaps. But let's go for it. This is the adapter getting ready for the HP Z840. But just before we do, are you familiar with the NGFF M.2 SSDs? These look like NVMEs, but they're the older form factor. You probably have these in like your laptops or maybe some other devices around the home. Now, you must have some of these lying around, and I was curious, can I install some of these random drives that I've left over? This one's got a M and B key, and can I get that to work along with the NVMe drive? So one, I guess, is meant to go through SATA, but I'm not quite sure. Would it allow both to go through PCIe? That'd be incredible if it did. But I'm guessing there's going to be a conflict, so I assume you have to connect a SATA cable in order for this to work. And we'll do that indeed, but tell you what, we'll quickly mount this up and I'll show you the end result. And the end result is it didn't work. I'm not even going to waste your time. The screwdriver's been really cool though. Check that screen out. Awesome. So problem. I think this is designed to allow one or the other, and it only connects through the SATA interface if you have the NGFF connected. So it didn't actually boot with both installed. So a bit of a shame. So what do we do with these? You could chuck them out or you could throw them into one of these adapters. Now this particular adapter is a USB to M.2 NVMe adapter, or you also get the M.2 to NGF. This particular one's a NGFF, so that I can fit this particular SATA SSD in one of these little handy sleeves. Take note, once you fit it in there, you really can't get it back out. It's pretty much lost forever. It's okay, use the USB cable. They come out without problems. But we'll quickly secure this one up. Really handy, given that it is a little aluminium case. It actually helps to keep these drives relatively cool, which is a huge bonus. Okay, nice and secure. Let's go for testing. It's okay, I have actually tested this in a related video. Check out my mini PC build. That was the prime place where I'm using that one. Some last details here. We do have that SATA connector there, which I assume allows them to run through the SATA interface if you were that way inclined. But definitely better using them for NVMEs. Okay, we're good to go. I've not fully secured this, but this is just the demo to show you what it looks like once it is installed in our machine. The host machine here is the HP Z840. This is a random machine that I picked up and I'm trying to fix to resell. But there it is. We've got our 4 LED indicators. We've also got an X16 PCIe slot there, which will be required for this adapter, as well as lane bifurcation or PCI slot bifurcation. And let's quickly load up my lab server. I'll show you how to get these drives initialized, and then we'll do some speed tests. So step 1 is going to be more or less doing the bifurcation. Check out a related video. Did this in a lot of detail, right? I'm using HP Performance Advisor, which basically allows us to modify our BIOS from within Windows, which is a pretty cool feature. And just give you a quick demo here. If we select some of these slots, like slot 2 perhaps, we will be able to change bifurcation. We can do other things like speed as well, which is kind of cool, or even disabling the slot if you have problems. So there it is, bifurcation, slot 2. If we do X4, 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 we will be able to run that adapter. All 4 NVMEs will show up in our operating system, and man, we're good to go. Now, some of them, because of bandwidth, can't do X16. So just take note of that. Very easy little thing. Now, I'm actually going to fit this into slot 6 for the final test. So I think we'll enable bifurcation on slot 6 just to make sure that adapter is going to work. There it is there. Okay, so very easy. We got our bifurcation set up. This is totally going to work. Now let's switch over to step 2, which is going to be initializing that RAID 0 setup. Now, it's not as tricky as you might think. It's actually really easy. So we load up Disk Manager. The drive should initialize first time. They'll get a quick format. Then all we have to do is pull these drives, assuming you want to do what I'm doing, which is creating a RAID 0 pull. So they call this a stripped volume. We're going to combine all 4 of those NVMEs into one single disk. Why would you want to do this? Well, it's going to give us tremendous speed while also increasing the capacity, with one slight caveat, which is risk. If this drive falls over, you lose all 8 terabytes, and, well, let's just hope that never happens. But highly recommend that you back up the data that you do save on this if you do go for RAID 0, which is 0 redundancy. Now, I'm just going to give it a very creative name. I'm going to call it RAID 1, not because it's RAID 1, because it's RAID test, and we'll call it a stripe drive as well. But it's just to help me keep track. I've got 4 of these, and yeah, numbers 1 to 4, there it is. Okay, converting it. This conversion will take a while given the size or capacity of these drives, so be prepared for that to take, I think it was about 2 hours, give or take. The joys of editing, you don't have to sit here for 2 hours waiting, although that would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? What do you think? Okay, no, we'll skip that idea, but let's go for the test. Let's jump straight into testing. Now, the first test that I wanted to do is actually DaVinci Blackmagicdesign's disk speed test. And let me quickly start up a HWiNFO DataLog as well. That's very useful. But there it is, disk speed test. This one's really handy for people who edit video, so I like to use this to check how quick these transfers are going to occur if I were to try and edit from this drive, which is completely my intent. I'm going to use this as my storage library. Now let's quickly do a crystal disk mark. Take note that's C drive. We may want to switch that. I called it R. There it is. Just shy of the 8 gigabytes, 8 terabytes that I would have hoped for, but that's okay. And that's not too shabby. Now, if you've seen my previous video, you may notice the speeds are down. I think last time we got about 8,000 megabyte per second. So it has dropped off a little bit. Not quite sure why the speeds are so variable, but there it is. Maybe it's a different machine, different slot, different NVMe setup or combination, whatever the reason may be. But there it is, still pretty solid speeds. 7,500 and 7,000 there on write speed. Another quick test. This is the ATTO disk benchmark. Very useful to compare different file sizes transferred across our NVMe pool. And as you'll notice there, once we get to around 500 kilobyte or larger, we get ultra fast transfer speeds. Very similar to Crystal Disk Mark or even to Task Manager. Now let's jump into the next most important test that we could possibly want to do, which is going to be somewhat of a real-world file transfer, starting with a very casual 80 gigabyte sort of mixed video file transfer, most of those being MPEG-4. Netting around 1,000 megabytes per second, that's not too shabby for a file transfer, and that does speed your workflow up quite a lot. Now, another one, just to be outrageous, let's go for 2 terabytes. Wait, it's going to take 4 hours? We don't want to sit here for 4 hours. Why is that only netting 180 megabytes per second? That's not quite as good. But either way, it's still going to be way quicker than doing it by alternative means. But yeah, that's definitely not as fast as it should be. Next one. This is a nice data graph that compares the speeds for Crystal Disk Mark for all 4 NVMEs. And I've segregated the data, so you'll have to pull all of this to see the final results. But I feel like that's useful to compare how well this adapter is doing its job between all 4 of the, shall we say, slots or segments of our PCIe slot. And so far looking pretty impressive. The end result there looking relatively reasonable. We don't have a lot of variability between the drives, and that nets are somewhere around 7,500 or so megabyte read and write speeds. Definitely check out the different measures there. We have the SEQ1M all the way through to the random writes, so sequential versus random, and seeing quite a difference, but the adapter is definitely taking a bit of a hit on the random writes, which is somewhat expected. Those are definitely more tedious on our drives. But there it is. Excellent data. And just to remind, this is the average max speed of our RAID 1 pool. Now the next data set. This is the average NVMe drive temperature, specifically focusing just on the ADATA Legend 2 terabyte drives. So if we pull those together, this is the temperature that I saw. So the green line would be the temperature for the NVMe itself. And curiously enough, the orange is going to be the hotspot temperature. So drive itself got relatively warm. The hotspot temperature actually came out lower than the drive itself, which is pretty impressive. I don't often see that. Usually the hotspot is quite hot. Now, I did expect heating to be a problem on my first test. I think these got up to like 55 degrees, give or take. So that's actually overall a pretty good result. Maybe the airflow was a little bit better on the particular system that I had it running compared to the previous test. But this is pretty cool data. Either way, the adapter's not going to overheat your NVMEs unless you run a tremendous amount of workload through these NVMEs. Now there's another graph, just for comparison. This one's going to be the Samsung 980 boot drive. This one's in the same machine under the same conditions. And again, we have the NVMe drive temperature and the hotspot temperature. But you see on this one, the hotspot is quite a bit higher than the base drive temperature. These would be for the sensors on the NVMEs. And looking at this one, during the crystal disk mark, we can actually see quite a decent jump there on the NVMe hotspot. We're up to 60 degrees. Now, keep in mind, these NVMEs more or less begin to throttle or bottleneck around 75 degrees Celsius. So at this point, 60 was still okay, but keep that in mind if you're doing really intensive tasks. You want to try and cool these NVMe drives down, otherwise they will run into problems. But that's not looking too shabby. We've got a half-decent metric there, and that tells us that that U.2 adapter is actually doing okay. It's not any worse than my adapter that I use for my NVMe, which was just a really, really cheap adapter. Now, the final graph. This is the average NVMe drive temperature during the crystal benchmark. And we're comparing the 4 ADATA NVMEs to the Samsung 980, which is my boot drive. So just a nice representation, and we can see the differences here. Very, very interesting that the NVMe temperature is actually higher in this particular U.2 adapter in gray. And in that last column there, the 980, the hotspot temperature there is climbing up a little bit relative to the others. So overall, the U.2 adapter is actually doing half decent at keeping the NVMEs cool. So there must be enough airflow, but I'd definitely expect them to heat up a little bit more if you're doing intensive tasks. But overall, they're not doing as bad as I would have thought relative to some of the other NVMe adapters that are available. Okay, that wraps up our HP Z840 with the U.2 to M.2 NVMe adapter. Hopefully you enjoyed that content. Now what do we do next? Well, there is one thing that I need to do, which is a quick theatrical teaser trailer of the HP Z8 G4. I've got a very impressive video taking shape that's going to take everything you need to know about the system, and it's going to combine it all into one video. Although, truth be told, I probably should split it into multiple videos. There's quite a lot going in. But there it is, the Bruce Wayne supercomputer. Definitely read that twice. You want to see what makes up a very, very good value machine in the modern day. Let's launch right in. RACERRRZ Studios presents the Bruce Wayne supercomputer. Read that twice. 2024 overview. The HP Z8 G4. Is it worth it? How could you utilize this machine in the modern day? Well, let's have a look at this quick overview / trailer. Get ready for upgrades. This machine is prime for upgrades. Subscribe for future videos on this particular machine, but we're going to do a full teardown. Absolutely no covers remain. Now, this particular machine has 9 PCI slots. It is RTX 5090 ready. Are those out yet? Maybe not. We've got dual CPUs, 24 RAM slots. That's dual Intel scalable Xeons, Gen 1 or Gen 2. We have the highest RAM spec of 2933 MHz. and a very, very capable system. We also have a nice anodized metal case with quick access handle with a lock. This machine is also wider and more aerodynamic than the HP Z840. We have two dual 1GB NICs, we have ample USB 3s. We have 3 PSU specifications. There's a 1125 watt, which is the low power. There's also a 1450 watt, which can produce up to 1700 watt. That's right, 1700 watt on 240 watt mains. This particular machine here is fully equipped. This is my editing machine. Definitely check out this cool little riser mod. Cable goes underneath our GPU. Now this particular system has the dual gold 6142 Xeons, a Zotac Ampolo Extreme RTX 3090 Ti, and I can even connect little random PCIe adapters should I choose to do so outside the case. Want to know more? Well, subscribe or check this one out in future videos. See you on the next one.